Welcome to the Books of Titans podcast hosted by Eric Rostad. Join him on his 15-year journey through the immortal books. He'll share what he's learning, explore profound ideas across time and cultures, and share the one thing he always hopes to remember from each immortal book.
Today I'm going to cover the tragedy play The Bacchae by Euripides. This comes in book 12 for my 2025 reading list, and this is the final tragedy that I read. I read them all. I read all of the tragedies by Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides. I was just planning on reading a couple by each author, but I really enjoyed them. I got into them and decided to read them all. There are 7 by Aeschylus, 7 by Sophocles, and then 19 by Euripides that have survived. They each wrote plenty more than that, but those are the ones that survive. And so I read through them all and saved the Bacchae here to be the final play that I read. And it's a unique one. It's about the god Dionysus, and the Bacchae refers to the female attendants of that god. Dionysus is the god of a lot of things. He's the god of inspiration and intoxication. He's the bringer of joy and celebration, but also the cause of violence and madness. It reminds me of that saying of Homer, Simpson, not the famous poet, where Homer says, "Alcohol is the cause and the solution to all of life's problems." You kind of get that a little bit with Dionysus, the god. But what's really interesting about Dionysus is that these tragedy plays were presented at the city Dionysus. They were presented at this festival that would take place in Athens in the springtime, and the plays would be presented in series of 4 plays by each playwright. And it was a competition, and I mean, you had Aeschylus going against Sophocles, and Euripides was at the same time. These 3 playwrights were alive, and their plays were being performed against each other, and that must have been just spectacular. But there would be 3 tragedy plays, and then a 4th play called a satyr play, Saytr, and that was kind of it'd be like a fraternity putting on a play. So it was bawdy, it was crude jokes and that kind of thing. But it was probably more of a comic release after you witness these 3 tragedies. So this one, the Bacchae, is a tragedy. But it's dealing with the god Dionysus, and with the festival being for Dionysus, it's an interesting idea to put on a play about the god that's being honored at this Greek festival. And so my one thing from this play deals with that, and so I'll cover that at the end of this episode. This will be a shorter episode. I'm just going to talk a little bit about the tragedy play and then cover that one thing. But it is unique in that this one is more about a god. Most of the time they're about people, and the gods come in and will, or you'll hear a prophecy about what the god has decreed. But this one, the god is a major part of it, and that is how the play starts off. And if you've listened to other podcast episodes, you know that I like to cover 3 or 4 things in each tragedy and just kind of keep them in mind. And so I'll cover 3 of those things in this episode. And one of those is the chorus. Who's the chorus? Where is it located? And then who is the first speaker? And so for this one, the chorus is of the Bacchant, the women who are the Bacchae, the Bacchants, I guess you call them. They're also called Maenads, and they are the female worshipers of Dionysus, and that's who makes up the chorus. The location is in Thebes, but when the women are dancing and they're getting worked up and kind of into an ecstasy in their worship of Dionysus, that takes place just briefly outside of the city. And then the first speaker is Dionysus, the god. And what Dionysus tells us right at the beginning is that he has taken the form of a human for this particular play. And the purpose is he has a goal, the god Dionysus does, and that is to show that he was born of a god. And so there's debate whether his father was Zeus or not. And so what Dionysus here is trying to do is to show that he was indeed born of a god. There's debate, so he wants to set the record straight and make sure everyone knows that he is the god. And so how do you do that? Well, you make sure that your will is supreme, that people follow your will, whether they want to or not. And that's part of what we see in this play here. So Dionysus starts things off. He's the god that indwells in many ways. And there's one part that talks about two gods in particular, Demeter and Dionysus. And Demeter is the god of grain and food. And then Dionysus is the god of wine. And both of those things are imbibed. They both enter into the person. And so there's an element of there being something unique about these gods, in that with wine, you drink it and it goes inside of you. Food, you eat it and it goes inside of you. Now, the Maenads are the women who are followers of Dionysus, and they go outside of the city and they dance in ecstasy, and they lose themselves. They just kind of succumb to this worship. And the best way I could think of this, it came to mind in one of the versions of this play that I read. And the cover, instead of it being cover of art that portrays Bacchus or Dionysus, it's a photo of Elvis, and it's his mugshot, or no, it appears to be his army photo. But have you seen those videos of women at an Elvis concert, and they're screaming like they've lost themselves. They do not have control over themselves. They're screaming. You see some women faint. Maybe it's a Beatles concert or Michael Jackson concert. It's like the most intense worship you can imagine. And so Elvis, I think, is a good picture of that for us, or just imagining how people can get worked up at a concert like that. That's how I kind of picture things are happening here. There's dancing. There's people just women get into this ecstasy. But at the beginning of this play, the way it's described is that it's kind of an overemphasis on the fact that these things are not crazy. Like, the women are ordered. Everything is under control. So you get this idea at the beginning, and there's even this part that says if a woman is virtuous and she partakes of these initiations and these dances and things, she'll remain virtuous. I mean, she's not going to change that it doesn't have that much power. But as we get on in the play, we realize that that's definitely not the case. And so what we see is, at some point, a messenger comes back from witnessing what these women are doing in their worship of Dionysus. And it's a story of chaos, and the women are so worked up that they go in and they attack a town, and they steal children, and they rip apart animals. And it's not the picture that we're given at the beginning, that things are ordered and virtuous women stay virtuous and that sort of thing. But there's a contrast in this play through the character of Pentheus. And Pentheus is the king of Thebes. And so Dionysus has come in, and there's this idea that even though Dionysus is from Thebes, there's this idea that he's kind of a foreign god that has just come in. It's this new element of it. He's taking the women away to be outside of the city and doing these weird dances. There's a lot of suspicion around it. There's a lot of just misunderstanding, and what is going on? Why is this god doing this? So Pentheus has this idea that he's got a lot of fear, but he wants to go to war against Dionysus. He wants to go to war against the Bacchae. The problem is, members of his own family, including his mother, are part of the women who are part of the followers and the worshipers of Dionysus. So Pentheus is kind of fighting this battle. So it comes down to who's going to win this battle. Is it Pentheus or is it Dionysus? And there's a statement that shows up that you can't battle the gods. And Dionysus being a god, or at least that's what he's trying to prove in this play, that he's the son of Zeus. Well, you can't battle the gods. So we see Pentheus, he imprisons some of the Maenads, he imprisons some of the worshippers. They go free. They are miraculously freed from prison. He even tries to imprison Dionysus, and Dionysus gets out of prison easily. But Dionysus begins to work on Pentheus. There's a lot of discussion between them going back and forth. And again, Dionysus has taken the form of a man, of a human at the beginning of this play. So when Pentheus is talking to Dionysus, it is a person that he is talking to in that role. And Dionysus picks up on something in Pentheus, and amidst all this fear, amidst this desire for force and to battle against the worshippers of Dionysus and Dionysus himself, there's a part of Pentheus where he is curious of what's going on, and Dionysus gives him an offer that he can't refuse. He says, "Why don't you come along and see what goes on at these initiations, at these worship sessions and outside the city." And again, it's only women. So Pentheus as a man cannot just go to this and partake. He's got to go. If he's a man, he's got to go and he's got to hide. And Dionysus even has him dress as a woman. And at first Pentheus is saying, "No way, if I dress as a woman, then I'm going to be paraded in front of my people, I'm as the king, and they're going to laugh at me and all that." But you slowly see that he doesn't even care about that anymore. And so Pentheus goes through this transformation himself, and you kind of wonder, has the mind of Pentheus been taken over by Dionysus? Is there this intoxication or madness that's been brought upon Pentheus? Well, Pentheus goes and watches what the women are doing, and they see him. And they are in their ecstasy, so they're not fully aware of what's going on. There's a madness about it, and they see Pentheus in a tree watching them, and so they get Pentheus out of this tree. And I want to read what transpires. That was when Pentheus learned he was near to disaster. His mother was the first at the killing. She was priestess, and she rushed to attack him. He tore off his headband in hopes she would recognize him, not kill him. He reached out to her cheek, miserable agaves, and said, "I am yours, mother. Your child, Pentheus. You gave me birth in the house of Echion. Pity me, mother. I have made mistakes, but do not kill your own son because of them." She was foaming at the mouth, face twisted, eyes rolling, not thinking as she ought to think. She was possessed by Bacchus and did not believe him. Grabbing his left wrist with her hand, she braced her foot against his rib. What a horrible fate for him, and tore off his shoulder, but not by brute strength. The god made it come off easily in her hands. And I'll stop reading there. It gets much more gruesome after that. But the mother, Pentheus's mother, is so out of her mind that she thinks he is a bull, and she is attacking a lion. And so she is attacking a lion. She's doing a good thing. She's, fighting against this lion, but she doesn't know it's her son. And so eventually she has the head of her son in her hands. She goes back to Thebes, and Cadmus, the previous king, sees her and kind of brings her back to Earth. And eventually, she realizes, in the utmost of recognition scenes in Greek tragedy, she realizes she has her own son's head in her hands. And what's amazing about this ending is that everyone suffers. The mother of Pentheus, she's a worshiper. She's the priestess here in this case of Dionysus. But it doesn't matter. She suffers along with Pentheus. And they're all, the remaining members of the family are exiled. Again, this would have been the royal family. Now they're exiled from Thebes, and they cannot remain there. And all because of this worship of Dionysus. So it's a very interesting ending. There's not a reward for being a worshiper of Dionysus. It all leads to destruction. Everyone is destroyed at the end of this worship of Dionysus. So I'm not sure what to make of this. I actually had to read the play twice. The first time I read it, I just was not, I didn't understand it. I didn't get what was going on. So I actually ordered a couple more copies of the book, a couple more translations. And the thing about these translations is they all have unique introductions. And so I end up reading the introductions and then I read the translations. And so just seeing a different translation is helpful, but then the introductions are extremely helpful as well. So I'll describe each of the versions that I read. But on the second reading, it helped me to understand it a lot more. And then some of the introductions that I came across were very helpful. So to kick things off, the first version that I read was the Penguin Classics version, and the translator of that was John Davy. And then the introduction was done by Dr. Richard Rutherford. So that one was good. I typically enjoy the Penguin Classics, but I did have trouble understanding it. So after that, I went to the Paul Woodruff translation, and this is done by Hackett Publishers. I've really enjoyed Paul Woodruff. I read some of his translations of Sophocles, and I really like it. And he's got good insight into the theater aspect of it and just how it would have been presented and that sort of thing as well. But yeah, his introduction was quite long. And this is the version of the book that had Elvis on the cover. And it was just this play in this book, whereas the other two books I had numerous plays by Euripides. The final version I got was the Oxford World's Classics, and this had a translation by James Morwood and an introduction by Edith Hall. I did not read the translation. I probably will at some point in my life, but I did read the introduction by Edith Hall and really enjoyed that. This is an important tragedy to read. It's not the most uplifting. It's pretty tragic ending, but it's referenced a lot. And I just saw it come up over and over. A number of podcasts I've listened to reference it. And so it's just a good tragedy play to have read and to know the story and to be able to understand then when you do hear other people talking about it and how it might relate to other works, other literature. I know plenty of other authors have written about this work. The chorus was really beautiful in this play. Sometimes I just I don't skim over it, but the chorus that's not where the action is. They're kind of giving the audience just insight into what's going on the stage. But the chorus in this one, they're describing the location outside of Thebes where all of this worship is happening. And it's a very Eden-like description. It's just, it was really beautiful. And I didn't expect that. I was kind of surprised by that. And again, oftentimes I kind of miss what the chorus is saying or just don't pay that much attention to it. But it really stood out in this play. I want to read a piece from the introduction of that Edith Hall introduction. And this gets into my one thing. And so let me just read this here. Pentheus, let me go a little bit earlier here. Drama demands that performer and spectator collude in a suspension of the empirically real world and an involvement in a world that is not really there. Pentheus dresses in a Maenads attire, just as each chorus member had adopted the costume and mask of a Maenad before actuality was forsaken and the drama began. In the original production, this also required assuming the identity of the opposite sex, for all the performers would have been male. Now, here's the key part. Bacchae, therefore, can be seen as a meditation on the very experience of theater, a mimetic enactment of the journey into and out of illusion, the journey over which Dionysus presides in the mysterious, fictive worlds he conjures up in his theater. End quote. I thought that was fascinating. Therefore, Bacchae, therefore, can be seen as a meditation on the very experience of theater. So in theater, I did a play in high school. I was in Guys and Dolls, and I just remember like being right before the play started, just being backstage, and I became that character. And for the duration of that play, I was that character. I was no longer Eric Rostad. I was Nathan Detroit. I was that character, and I embodied that character. And it's an amazing thing. I mean, you're taking on this other identity for this play. And so this is almost like a meta version of that, but it's just so interesting because again, this is being performed at the city Dionysus, what they called the festival where these tragedy plays were performed. And so it's in honor of Dionysus, and Dionysus is the god of theater and dramatic festivals, or drama, and both tragedy and comedies. And so what is happening on the stage where someone is assuming another role, that's what's happening to these Maenads. It's what's happening to these women in this particular play. It's as if Dionysus has embodied in them to be a different person. There's a madness of it, but there's also just there's a losing of themselves in that. And that introduction, that information in the introduction really helped me to understand what this play was about. It's about Dionysus, obviously, but it's kind of about that theater aspect too, and an audience suspending belief for the 2 hours of this play to know that even as they're performed back then, where all the characters were men, not all the characters, but all the actors, but they would play women characters. So it's all sorts of things going on, and how it related to Dionysus, the god that was being celebrated at these festivals was really interesting to me. Well, that's going to do it for this episode. I hope you read this tragedy play at some point. I found it difficult at first to understand, and it's one that I may just return to at different points in my life to read it again and just, try to understand it more and more each time. I'm glad I read it. It was difficult at first, but got through that and enjoyed it. The second reading was a lot better. I'll be back next week. I do have a few more Euripides tragedies that I read before that I just haven't covered on the podcast yet. So I'll probably get to those coming up. I do want to do an episode, kind of an overall Greek tragedy episode, and just talk about maybe some ideas on how to read through them if you've never read them before, just some things that I learned reading through the Greek tragedies, my favorites, my least favorites, that kind of thing, but just kind of an overall view of the Greek tragedies. Next up, I'm going to be reading the fragments of Euripides. So these are plays that did not survive, but we either have a fragment of them or they were quoted somewhere. Maybe Aristotle quoted something by Euripides, but we don't have the full play, but we do have this quote by Aristotle, so we can kind of look at that and I wonder who said that, or I wonder what part of the play that was. And so I've really enjoyed reading these fragments. I did that with Sophocles, and look forward to doing it with Euripides here. You can follow Books of Titans on Substack. That's where I post my podcast episodes and then write an article every Tuesday. The podcast comes out every Friday. You can subscribe there, and if you do, you can become a paid subscriber. And I have plans for as little as $5 per month. That helps to support this show and to support this podcast, and also gives you access to a monthly reading list reading group that I lead, called Short Great Books. And I try to pick books that are between 2 to 5 hours. We've read a couple Greek tragedies. We've read Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass, The Great Gatsby. We have The Old Man and the Sea by Hemingway coming up next. So if you're interested in that, we have a lot of fun with that. I do an in-person group, and then I do an online one over Zoom. So I'd love if you subscribe to the podcast. You'll get the information for those online meetings if you subscribe. Well, you can follow Books of Titans on Instagram or Twitter as well, just both at Books of Titans. And I will be back next week talking about another Euripides tragedy, or that Greek tragedy full episode. Until then, keep reading, keep learning, and keep listening. I'm out.